The Happiness Hypothesis. Book by Jonathan Haidt. Detailed Summary. Chapter 1: The Divided Self. The Divided Self is the first chapter of Jonathan Haidt's book The Happiness Hypothesis, Finding Modern Truth in Ancient Wisdom. In this chapter, Haidt introduces the concept of the divided self, which refers to the idea that the human mind is composed of different mental modules or systems that sometimes conflict with each other. He argues that this division can create problems for individuals seeking happiness and fulfillment. Haidt begins the chapter by discussing the story of Arjuna from the Hindu epic, the Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna faces a moral dilemma as he prepares for battle against his own relatives. He consults with his charioteer, who turns out to be the god Krishna in disguise, and together they discuss the nature of the self and the nature of duty. Haidt uses this story as a metaphor for the divided self, arguing that each of us has a charioteer in our minds, who must navigate conflicting desires and impulses. Haidt then goes on to describe some of the specific ways in which the self is divided. He discusses the rider and the elephant metaphor from psychologist Jonathan Haidt's book The Happiness Hypothesis, which suggests that the conscious mind is like a rider trying to control the powerful, unconscious mind, which is like an elephant. Haidt also introduces the concept of the ID and the superego from Sigmund Freud's psychoanalytic theory, which suggests that the mind is divided into two parts that are in constant conflict with each other. Haidt argues that this division can create problems for individuals seeking happiness and fulfillment. He suggests that our modern society has created a world that is out of sync with our evolved nature, and that this can lead to conflicts between our conscious desires and our unconscious impulses. He discusses some of the specific challenges that this creates, such as addiction, anxiety, and depression. Finally, Haidt suggests that one way to overcome the divided self is to cultivate mindfulness, which he defines as the ability to observe and describe one's thoughts and feelings from a neutral perspective. He argues that mindfulness can help us to become more aware of our unconscious impulses and to better regulate our behavior in accordance with our conscious desires. Overall, the main idea of this chapter is that the human mind is composed of different mental modules or systems that sometimes conflict with each other, and that this division can create problems for individuals seeking happiness and fulfillment. Haidt introduces several specific ways in which the self is divided, and discusses some of the challenges that this creates. He suggests that mindfulness can be a helpful tool for overcoming the divided self and achieving greater happiness and fulfillment. Chapter 2: Changing Your Mind. Changing Your Mind is the second chapter of Jonathan Haidt's book The Happiness Hypothesis, Finding Modern Truth in Ancient Wisdom. In this chapter, Haidt explores the idea of change, specifically the nature of change and how it can be achieved. Haidt begins the chapter by discussing the concept of the default mode network in the brain, which is the network of brain regions that are active when a person is not engaged in any particular task. This network is associated with self-referential thinking and mind-wandering. Haidt argues that this network can be a barrier to change because it is resistant to new ideas and experiences. He then goes on to discuss some of the specific factors that can influence our ability to change. He introduces the concept of confirmation bias, which is the tendency to seek out information that confirms our existing beliefs and to discount information that contradicts them. Haidt also discusses the role of emotions in shaping our beliefs and our ability to change them. He argues that emotions can be powerful motivators for change, but they can also be barriers if they are too strong or too negative. Haidt suggests that one way to overcome the barriers to change is to engage in cognitive therapy, which involves challenging and changing our negative or irrational beliefs. He also suggests that we can improve our ability to change by cultivating virtues such as humility, curiosity, and open-mindedness. Finally, Haidt discusses the concept of self-transcendence, which involves shifting our focus from our own desires and concerns to a larger purpose or goal. He argues that self-transcendence can be a powerful motivator for change because it can help us to see beyond our own limited perspectives and to connect with something larger than ourselves. Overall, the main idea of this chapter is that change is difficult but possible, and that there are specific factors that can help or hinder our ability to change. Haidt suggests that we can improve our ability to change by engaging in cognitive therapy, cultivating virtues such as humility and open-mindedness, and focusing on self-transcendence. By doing so, we can overcome the barriers to change and achieve greater happiness and fulfillment. Chapter 3 Reciprocity with a Vengeance. Reciprocity with a Vengeance is the third chapter of Jonathan Haidt's book, The Happiness Hypothesis, Finding Modern Truth in Ancient Wisdom. In this chapter, Haidt explores the concept of reciprocity and how it can be both a force for good and a source of conflict. Haidt begins the chapter by discussing the importance of reciprocity in human societies. He argues that reciprocity is a fundamental principle that underlies many of our social interactions, from simple exchanges of goods and services to more complex forms of cooperation and trust. Haidt then goes on to explore the different forms of reciprocity, including balanced reciprocity, in which there is an expectation of equal exchange, and generalized reciprocity, in which there is no expectation of immediate return but a belief in the eventual balance of giving and receiving. He also discusses the concept of negative reciprocity, which involves the desire for revenge or punishment when someone violates the rules of reciprocity. Haidt argues that negative reciprocity can be a powerful motivator for social cooperation, but it can also lead to conflicts and escalations of violence. Haidt also explores the concept of moralistic punishment, which is the idea that people will punish others for violating moral norms even when they themselves are not directly harmed by the behavior. He argues that moralistic punishment can be a powerful tool for maintaining social order, but it can also be a source of conflict when different groups have different moral norms. Finally, Haidt discusses the concept of virtuous circles, which are positive feedback loops in which acts of generosity and kindness lead to increased trust and cooperation. He argues that virtuous circles can be created by cultivating virtues such as generosity, gratitude, and forgiveness. Overall, the main idea of this chapter is that reciprocity is a fundamental principle that underlies many of our social interactions, and that it can be both a force for good and a source of conflict. Haidt explores the different forms of reciprocity, including negative reciprocity and moralistic punishment, and discusses how they can be both beneficial and problematic. He also suggests that virtuous circles can be created by cultivating virtues such as generosity and forgiveness, which can lead to increased trust and cooperation in society. Chapter 4 The Faults of Others. The Faults of Others is the fourth chapter of Jonathan Haidt's book, The Happiness Hypothesis, Finding Modern Truth in Ancient Wisdom. In this chapter, Haidt explores the psychological mechanisms that lead us to focus on the faults of others and to judge them harshly, as well as strategies for overcoming these biases. Haidt begins the chapter by discussing the fundamental attribution error, which is the tendency to attribute the behavior of others to their underlying character traits, rather than to situational factors. He argues that this bias can lead us to judge others too harshly and to overlook the role that situational factors play in shaping behavior. Haidt then goes on to discuss the concept of self-serving bias, which is the tendency to attribute our own behavior to situational factors, rather than to our underlying character traits. He argues that this bias can lead us to overlook our own faults and to judge others too harshly. He also discusses the concept of in-group bias, which is the tendency to favor members of our own group and to judge outsiders more harshly. Haidt argues that this bias can lead to intergroup conflicts and can make it difficult for people to see the perspective of those who are different from them. Finally, Haidt discusses strategies for overcoming these biases, including cultivating virtues such as empathy, humility, and forgiveness. He also suggests that we can improve our ability to see the perspective of others by exposing ourselves to diverse viewpoints and by engaging in perspective-taking exercises. Overall, the main idea of this chapter is that we have biases that lead us to judge others too harshly and to overlook our own faults. Haidt explores the psychological mechanisms that underlie these biases, including the fundamental attribution error, self-serving bias, and in-group bias. He also suggests that we can overcome these biases by cultivating virtues such as empathy and humility and by exposing ourselves to diverse perspectives. By doing so, we can improve our relationships with others and increase our own happiness and well-being. Chapter 5 The Pursuit of Happiness. The Pursuit of Happiness is the fifth chapter of Jonathan Haidt's book, The Happiness Hypothesis, Finding Modern Truth in Ancient Wisdom. In this chapter, Haidt explores the concept of happiness and the various factors that contribute to it. Haidt begins the chapter by discussing the importance of happiness and its role in human life. He argues that happiness is not just a subjective feeling, but also has objective components such as health, wealth, and social connectedness. He also discusses the concept of hedonic adaptation, which is the tendency for people to adapt to changes in their circumstances and return to their baseline level of happiness. Haidt then goes on to discuss the various factors that contribute to happiness, including genetics, life circumstances, and intentional activities. He argues that genetics play a significant role in determining our baseline level of happiness, but that life circumstances such as income and social relationships also have an impact. He also suggests that intentional activities such as gratitude, acts of kindness, and meditation can help to increase happiness. Haidt also discusses the concept of flow, which is the experience of being completely absorbed in an activity that is challenging but achievable. He argues that flow is a key contributor to happiness and can be cultivated by finding activities that are both challenging and enjoyable. Finally, Haidt explores the concept of satisfaction with life, which is the overall evaluation that people make of their lives. He argues that satisfaction with life is influenced by both objective and subjective factors, and that people who have a sense of purpose and meaning in their lives tend to be more satisfied. Overall, the main idea of this chapter is that happiness is a complex concept that is influenced by a variety of factors. Haidt explores the role of genetics, life circumstances, intentional activities, and flow in contributing to happiness, and discusses the importance of having a sense of purpose and meaning in life. He also suggests that by understanding the various factors that contribute to happiness, we can take steps to increase our own well-being and lead more fulfilling lives. Chapter 6 Love and Attachments. Love and Attachments is the 6th chapter of Jonathan Haidt's book The Happiness Hypothesis, Finding Modern Truth in Ancient Wisdom. In this chapter, Haidt explores the concepts of love and attachment and how they contribute to human happiness. Haidt begins the chapter by discussing the evolutionary origins of attachment, arguing that attachment is an adaptive response that promotes the survival and well-being of infants. He also discusses the different attachment styles identified by psychologists, including secure, anxious, and avoidant attachments. Haidt then goes on to explore the concept of love, arguing that love is a complex emotion that is influenced by a variety of factors, including biology, culture, and personal experience. He discusses the different types of love identified by psychologists, including romantic love, companionate love, and altruistic love. Haidt also discusses the role of intimacy and commitment in romantic relationships, arguing that these factors are critical for sustaining long-term relationships. He also explores the importance of positive illusions, such as idealizing one's partner and downplaying their faults, in maintaining romantic love. Finally, Haidt discusses the concept of flow in relationships, arguing that couples who experience flow together tend to be happier and more satisfied with their relationships. He suggests that flow can be cultivated in relationships by finding activities that both partners enjoy and that challenge them. Overall, the main idea of this chapter is that love and attachment are critical components of human happiness. Haidt explores the evolutionary origins of attachment and the different attachment styles, as well as the complex nature of love and the different types of love identified by psychologists. He also discusses the importance of intimacy, commitment, and positive illusions in sustaining romantic relationships, and suggests that flow can be cultivated in relationships to increase happiness and satisfaction. Chapter 7 The Uses of Adversity. The Uses of Adversity is the 7th chapter of Jonathan Haidt's book The Happiness Hypothesis, Finding Modern Truth in Ancient Wisdom. In this chapter, Haidt explores the concept of adversity and the different ways in which it can be beneficial to human well-being. Haidt begins the chapter by discussing the rationalization trap, which is the tendency for people to look for reasons to justify their suffering or adversity. He argues that this trap can be harmful because it can prevent people from learning from their experiences and growing as individuals. Haidt then goes on to explore the concept of post-traumatic growth, which is the idea that people can experience positive changes as a result of adversity. He discusses the different factors that contribute to post-traumatic growth, including social support, cognitive processing, and positive emotions. Haidt also discusses the concept of adversarial growth, which is the idea that people can benefit from challenges and competition in their lives. He argues that adversity can help people develop resilience, perseverance, and other positive character traits. Finally, Haidt discusses the importance of finding meaning in adversity. He argues that people who are able to find meaning in their suffering are better able to cope with adversity and are more likely to experience post-traumatic growth. Overall, the main idea of this chapter is that adversity can be beneficial to human well-being if it is approached in the right way. Haidt explores the concepts of post-traumatic growth and adversarial growth, arguing that adversity can help people develop positive character traits and find meaning in their lives. He also suggests that by reframing adversity in a positive light, people can learn from their experiences and grow as individuals. Chapter 8: The Felicity of Virtue. The Felicity of Virtue is the 8th chapter of Jonathan Haidt's book, The Happiness Hypothesis: Finding Modern Truth in Ancient Wisdom. In this chapter, Haidt explores the concept of virtue and its relationship to human happiness. Haidt begins the chapter by discussing the different theories of virtue that have been proposed by philosophers over the centuries, including Aristotle's concept of eudaimonia, or flourishing, and the Stoic concept of tranquility. He also explores the concept of moral intuition, which is the idea that people have an intuitive sense of right and wrong that is influenced by both biology and culture. Haidt then goes on to discuss the importance of moral character in promoting human well-being. He argues that people who possess virtues such as honesty, courage, and compassion are more likely to experience happiness and fulfillment in their lives. He also discusses the role of self-control in developing moral character, and the importance of cultivating habits that promote virtue. Haidt also explores the concept of moral elevation, which is the experience of feeling uplifted and inspired by acts of moral beauty or goodness. He argues that moral elevation can be a powerful force in promoting virtuous behavior and enhancing human well-being. Finally, Haidt discusses the relationship between virtue and social capital, arguing that societies that are characterized by high levels of trust and cooperation tend to be happier and more prosperous than societies with low levels of social capital. He suggests that promoting virtue and moral character can be an important means of building social capital and promoting human well-being. Overall, the main idea of this chapter is that virtue and moral character are important components of human happiness. Haidt explores the different theories of virtue and the importance of moral intuition, as well as the role of self-control and moral elevation in promoting virtuous behavior. He also discusses the relationship between virtue and social capital, arguing that promoting moral character can be an important means of building trust and cooperation in society. Chapter 9: Divinity with or without God. Divinity with or without God is the 9th chapter of Jonathan Haidt's book, The Happiness Hypothesis: Finding Modern Truth in Ancient Wisdom. In this chapter, Haidt explores the concept of spirituality and its relationship to human happiness. Haidt begins the chapter by discussing the different ways in which people experience spirituality, including religious beliefs, mystical experiences, and the sense of awe and wonder that can be inspired by nature and art. He argues that spirituality can be a powerful source of human well-being, providing people with a sense of meaning and purpose that can help them navigate the challenges of life. Haidt then goes on to explore the relationship between spirituality and religion. He suggests that while religion can provide a framework for spiritual experiences, it can also be a source of conflict and division. He argues that it is possible to experience spirituality without adhering to any particular religious tradition, and that spirituality can be a source of connection and unity across different cultures and beliefs. Haidt also discusses the importance of cultivating virtues such as gratitude, forgiveness, and compassion in promoting spiritual well-being. He argues that these virtues can help people connect with something larger than themselves and experience a sense of transcendence that can be deeply fulfilling. Finally, Haidt explores the concept of divinity, arguing that it is possible to experience a sense of divinity or higher power without necessarily believing in a specific deity. He suggests that the experience of divinity can be found in many different aspects of life, including human relationships, art, and nature. Overall, the main idea of this chapter is that spirituality can be a powerful source of human well-being, providing people with a sense of meaning and purpose that can help them navigate the challenges of life. Haidt explores the relationship between spirituality and religion, the importance of cultivating virtues in promoting spiritual well-being, and the concept of divinity. He argues that it is possible to experience a sense of divinity or higher power without necessarily believing in a specific deity, and that spirituality can be a source of connection and unity across different cultures and beliefs. Chapter 10: Happiness Comes From Between. Happiness Comes From Between is the 10th chapter of Jonathan Haidt's book, The Happiness Hypothesis: Finding Modern Truth in Ancient Wisdom. In this chapter, Haidt explores the role of social connections and relationships in promoting human happiness. Haidt begins the chapter by discussing the concept of social capital, which is the idea that social connections and networks can be a valuable resource for individuals and communities. He argues that people who have strong social connections tend to be happier and healthier than those who are socially isolated. Haidt then goes on to discuss the different ways in which social connections can promote happiness. He argues that relationships with friends and family members can provide emotional support and a sense of belonging, while relationships with romantic partners can provide intimacy and companionship. He also explores the concept of flow, which is the experience of being fully engaged and absorbed in an activity, and argues that social connections can help facilitate this experience. Haidt also discusses the importance of reciprocity and generosity in promoting social connections and happiness. He argues that people who engage in acts of kindness and generosity tend to be more socially connected and happier than those who do not. Finally, Haidt explores the role of culture and community in promoting social connections and well-being. He argues that societies that prioritize social connections and relationships tend to be happier and more prosperous than those that do not, and suggests that promoting social capital can be an important means of promoting human happiness and well-being. Overall, the main idea of this chapter is that social connections and relationships are an important component of human happiness. Haidt explores the different ways in which social connections can promote happiness, including emotional support, a sense of belonging, and the experience of flow. He also discusses the importance of reciprocity and generosity in promoting social connections, as well as the role of culture and community in promoting social capital and well-being. Conclusion, on balance. The conclusion of Jonathan Haidt's book The Happiness Hypothesis, Finding Modern Truth in Ancient Wisdom provides a summary of the key ideas and themes explored throughout the book, as well as some final reflections on the nature of human happiness. Haidt begins the conclusion by highlighting the importance of balancing the various components of human happiness, including pleasure, meaning, and social connections. He argues that a happy life requires both positive emotions and a sense of purpose and belonging, and that achieving this balance requires a deep understanding of the human psyche and the various factors that contribute to well-being. Haidt also reflects on the role of ancient wisdom in contemporary life, arguing that the ideas and insights of philosophers and thinkers from different cultures and eras can provide valuable guidance and inspiration in our quest for happiness. He suggests that we can learn from the wisdom of the past by engaging in practices such as meditation, gratitude, and self-reflection, which can help us cultivate the virtues and habits that promote happiness and well-being. Finally, Haidt acknowledges that achieving happiness is not always easy or straightforward, and that life is full of challenges and setbacks. However, he argues that by cultivating resilience, optimism, and a sense of purpose, we can weather the storms of life and continue to pursue happiness and fulfillment. Overall, the conclusion of the happiness hypothesis emphasizes the importance of balance, ancient wisdom, and resilience in the pursuit of human happiness. Haidt's book provides a nuanced and multifaceted exploration of the factors that contribute to well-being, and offers practical insights and guidance for readers seeking to cultivate a happier and more fulfilling life.